Hello, welcome to Real Talk with Sean. And this is a brand new format on Search with Sean. Really excited about this one. I'll try and explain basically what it is, because it is a new format for this channel. And then I'll get on to our great guest, of course. So generally, the format of the show is to cover some of the most talked about topics in the SEO industry and digital marketing generally, I guess. And I'll open up the questions to each of our guests, and then I'll open up the floor if there's any further discussions on the topics that we're discussing. So let's get on to our great guests. So first of all, we've got Natalia Witczyk. Natalia is CEO of Mosquita Digital. Hopefully I pronounced that one okay. And next we have Daniel Foley Carter. So Daniel is the director at Assertive and SEO Stack. And we have John Hutson. So John is currently head of SEO at Inc. Digital. And finally, we have Ashley Liddell. And Ashley is a co-founder of Deviation. Yeah, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. And so excited about this. So yeah, topic one, and I'll throw this out to Daniel first. So obviously Google's original mission statement was to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. How do you think Google's doing on that right now?
Well, I think that's probably one of the most obvious questions in the industry for people that work in the industry. I think Google has deviated so far from what made it what it was in the first place, because prior to Google, we actually had a much better search landscape. So back in the 90s into the early 2000s, we had hundreds of search engines. And, you know, whilst we did have core players like Ask, Yahoo, Alta Vista, these search engines traditionally were very cluttered. They didn't really focus too much specifically on just the search product. That's where Google came along, and part of its original mission statement was to make search good. And to make search good, they provided the best quality results in the most uncluttered interface. Early versions of Google didn't have any ads, didn't have anything. It was a basic search box with search results. But I think, as with any product, obviously the value of Google grew and grew and grew. Obviously they become listed, they continue to grow. And then all of a sudden it starts to transition into that thing where it's no longer a product for the people, it's a shareholder product, which is what Google is. So once Google became a shareholder product, it then starts to go in the direction of making as much money as possible. And as we know, whenever you're trying to make money from something like a search engine, it involves changing the layout and the functionality to focus on paid. And as we know, paid got worse and worse. Obviously, we had the sidebar that moved to the top. Then we had 3 results, then 4 results. Then there was just general integration and more ads. And then obviously, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've seen Google search change dramatically to the point where things like AIOs are hoovering up clicks, ads are everywhere, product injections, search features from Google. So, you know, Google's completely deviated away from what it set out to do. To be honest, I think this is more of a problem for us in the community because we work with it day to day, so we see it. But I think Joe Public might see things change, but they won't necessarily see it the way that we do. But obviously it doesn't benefit us. So I think Google's really come away from what it set out to do. I think their tagline for many years was "Do no evil," which is ironic now considering what they did after helpful content updates, which I would consider pretty evil, to be honest. But there you go.
Yeah, fair points there. Natalia, what's your thoughts on that?
I do agree with basically everything that Daniel has said, but to be an advocate of the devil, I'm going to try to kind of see also the point that, in my opinion, Google is still the best search engine on the market, even if it's not improving the way it used to. Because in the past, the updates in Google used to actually improve the results, at least to some extent. You could see why they're going that direction. And recent updates are very questionable. I agree with that. However, I think to make sense of the chaos and information chaos we are dealing with these days, you really have to change the way you think about the search engine, and it's not an easy thing to do. So just the resources they need to just run the index they have, and crawling on this scale, it's not cheap and it's not easy to do. So any of the competitors that try to come up now and have their own index either have to resign, like some projects just didn't make it, or are struggling to collect a decent index enough to kick off and have their own product. So they have to depend on Bing index instead. So I think we're in a very challenging times when there's just such a surplus of information. It's not easy to organize it at all.
Yeah, good points. John, what do you think?
Yeah, probably echoing both prior points, to be honest. I think Natalia makes a good point in respect of, I think if you take one of the core components of their sort of mission, I think the kind of organizing and cataloging of that, I think it is second to none. So, you know, the computing power they've got, the resource they've had all over time, and let's face it, the amount of information they can crawl, you know, generally speaking, if you put something live, you can usually get it crawled pretty quickly, usually indexed pretty quickly, and then considered for ranking. I was also going to say about when Daniel said about the do no evil, whatever their sort of mission statement was as well, that soon got removed from their collateral because they probably realized they couldn't adhere to that at some point. The other portion though of the statement is making it easily accessible, and Daniel makes some good points in respect of how the transition from a super simple interface of 10 blue links to a very, very cluttered interface, because they kind of had to go that route. So I think there are kind of theories behind, or I say theories, I wouldn't want to use the word conspiracy, but it's not proven per se, that they want to try and make the search result, the organic search results, a little bit poor enough where people think, actually, I'm going to click on an ad instead. So there is that kind of way up of like, okay, well, what boundaries can I flirt with to make sure that I don't lose users because it's too poor, but I do gain more ad clicks because it's poor enough where people will utilize the ads. And then the final piece that I'd sort of want to raise is that, again, this could be on the sort of almost conspiracy-esque side of things, but I don't think it should be necessarily completely brushed under the carpet. Is there have been examples of whereby search results have somewhat been suppressed if it's based on what would be considered geopolitical or kind of health or whatever it is, kind of whatever governments could kind of get involved and lobby companies such as Google or the Metas of this world, etc. We don't want certain things to happen. There was one example where someone from the UN had said on a sort of a global stage that they had to speak to Google to ensure that the UN sources for climate change information was front and center, because they, I quote, own the information on climate change. And, you know, it's things like that. So it's, and to Daniel's point, the end consumer won't see that or notice that because they're not dialed into how Google works. So I think, yeah, in full agreement with the guys previously, but with the addition of those points and considerations.
Yeah, really, really. And I mean, when you're speaking, actually made me think about, because I covered it on our news episodes around when the US elections were going on and how things were going missing, let's say, for certain candidates, where it seemed to be, oh, sorry, yep, our mistake, we'll put them back on now. And that seemed to happen to the same candidate twice, which seems either a coincidence or just a mistake, who knows. But things like that happen, and that isn't really the most useful information. And also Sarah Bacona, who I've had on recently, discussed around, you know, biases and stuff. So, you know, there's a lot of mistakes in there in terms of not being helpful and useful for certain people who are doing certain searches, you know, not really the best information coming up for searches, and also some really incorrect information that could cause harm to people's health. So, you know, it's interesting. Sorry, Ashley, I kept you waiting there. What's your piece?
No, it's fine. I think from my point of view, I echo a lot of what's been said. And then my addition to that would be around that biases point. I think as Google's become that more business focused and lost view of its sort of worldly mission, if you like, that it started with, we've seen those biases come to fruition at a business to business level. So Google's got a vested interest in Reddit all of a sudden Reddit pops up more and more on the SERPs, and they're trying to get Reddit more prominent in the SERPs. So it seems. It could be a conspiracy theory, but that's definitely my observation over the last 12 months. And then there's the pushing of its own products. So I was a user of Google Stadia, which was their video game console. In the lead up to that coming out, there was a lot of content in video game related SERPs and video game query related SERPs that was discussing Stadia and the potential of Stadia. And that was all of a sudden pushed higher up the SERPs or discussed more within the SERPs than previously. So I think they're looking after their own business interests a lot more now than what they probably did when the business first started in terms of search. And then there was another point I wanted to make around the geopolitics point. I think it is something that we're definitely concerned with within the industry because we're sort of in that echo chamber. But I think a perfect example of the fact that the public don't actually understand maybe what Google are trying to achieve, what they set out to achieve, or don't really care, is the point around Kanye West coming out and saying, Adidas, what are you doing? Why are you above me? Why are you doing this? Not realizing that it's not actually Adidas that are responsible for listing them in that organic listing on Google for that keyword. I think that's a really good example of someone in that public space who just doesn't get how Google are qualifying content and ranking that content. And it lends itself to the idea of Google could probably have this mission of organizing the world's data, but outside of us in the industry, would it actually be appreciated in the way that they maybe set out to anyway? So again, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate there on Google's part.
I'd jump in as well and say that on the Reddit side of things, I did my own analysis on this as far as I could, but it's crazy because if you look traditionally at how Google indexes and caches data on the web, Google has always had access to tens of billions of documents. And the thing is with Reddit is that such a large amount of that data could be construed as factually wrong, incorrect, inappropriate for use. And I know people obviously said about Reddit using that, Google using Reddit data for training, but I seriously don't think that's the case. I actually think one of the reasons why Reddit did so well, and this is everything that I can glean from it, it's because it's when you look at like Reddit content, for example, it tends to be a more unbiased, real view of things. So, for example, if I want to buy a mobile phone and I look for mobile phone reviews, you know, there's always that bias whenever you're looking at a lot of these sites, because if it's an affiliate business, they want you to buy the product. Whereas if you go on something that is user generated, you're going to get, a much broader picture of what, you'll get people that say, I bought this phone, I had nothing but problems, charging port broke, blah, blah, blah. And you tend to get more of a negative sentiment on user generated content, and that creates a high level of engagement. And as we know, since helpful content came along, affiliate took a kick in the teeth whilst user generated content didn't. And since from the DOJ trial, it revealed that, and we knew it for a long time, that Google couldn't fully understand the context of content. Behavior is the strongest factor. So if you pair user generated content that's unbiased with user behavior, it then starts to become clearer why Reddit might have won when affiliate sites didn't. So I just thought that was a interesting topic to look into, and just my thoughts on that one.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, just before I open up to everyone else, just on that law, so obviously we're following it on the channel, and obviously Google are basically saying, well, we are the best search engine. When someone else better comes along, then you'll be able to go to them. But for now, we're doing the best job we can, and we're just trying to make some money along the way, I guess. And also, from the public point of view, just to put in a caveat there, that Google have kind of made sure that they're in the faces of everyone on everyone's devices, everything. That's obviously come clear. So they've kind of made it that they're the most dominant. And obviously, you could say it's a great business strategy, but obviously that might with the lawsuit coming out, it might change. I still am skeptical if they're actually going to get anything like that done against them. But we are seeing some movement in the market share. I know it's very, very small, but people are shifting to social and some good, even Alida Solis said Bing have increased their share a bit in the last year or so. So, there is some shifts there. So I don't know if anyone has anything else to add on this topic.
I'd probably say with the way that Google's going, the thing is that I don't think they'll be broken up just because Google has, Alphabet as a business has untold weight behind it in any way, shape or form. We know that politics globally is corrupt. We know that money buys favors. And whilst it might look like a public show of we're doing something about it, I can bet you that it will fall by the wayside and go quiet. Google built an ecosystem, and I think that ecosystem gives them unparalleled protection because they have a significant share of market with mobile devices and Android. They have YouTube. They have so much weight in the marketplace. Search is not a product that makes them money. So, search was the product that allowed them to have that ecosystem and to build the user base, because Google is now, a brand that just pretty much everyone across the globe knows, because they now have that brand weight and that brand equity. They're not as reliant on keeping organic the way it is. So if we look at humans as a society, we can see that we're going through a paradigm shift. So what I mean by that is, for example, a lot of humans now have less time to do anything. We all have busier lives. We don't have as much time. So we see a mass increase in short form content consumption. You only have to see the growth of TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, Facebook even doing it. So the fact is that we consume content faster in shorter bursts. When we look at what organic traditionally is as a product, it's a product where we have to go looking for what we're looking for. So that involves doing a search, going on a website, searching around, going back to search, going to the next result. And that's a pretty archaic way of doing things. So when you look at things like Google AIOs, what they're fundamentally trying to do is bring the answer to you as opposed for you to go to the answer. And I think because we're seeing that shift, and you see it with ChatGPT, answer engines, I can go to ChatGPT, ask it for a specific thing and get a specific answer back. So I think search is changing. Google won't go anywhere. Other search engines might see a slight bump in their market share. But even if we look at Bing, for example, a majority of Bing's users typically are people that are 50 years plus of age, because Bing tends to be, I think, the default search engine for Edge when people use Windows. So I think, short form content is where things are going now. And I think search engines like Google just really are working hard to bring answers to people so people don't have to go looking for them. So it'd be interesting to see how this year plays out.
Yeah, and I think if you're talking about the question of the market share side of things, I think Google will still dominate, and probably for a very, very long time yet. But I think there's definitely going to be that fragmentation of user journeys in general anyway. I mean, there is, if you just sort of pay attention to your own usage behavior, even if you're researching into things, even if your initial research behavior is on a traditional search engine like Google, with all those signals you're sending to all of those other platforms, algorithmically, you're then going to start being pre-served content that is fitting your behavior, if you see what I mean. So then more stuff is being served to you on a platform such as TikTok or on a platform such as YouTube. So it's almost like they are the kind of the catalyst for the other platforms somewhat, because you're visiting other websites and they can kind of tag you and follow you, etc., to then help their algorithms. And of course, as soon as you then engage with that, say a TikTok algorithm, so to speak, you're then kind of in that mode of, okay, well, we're now going to be serving you this type of information for a while until you disengage and then move on to something else. So I think it's not that Google's sort of under threat of huge market share loss per se, but I do feel that from a general user behavior point of view, I think people are going to get just more and more habitually using other platforms for their needs end to end. And of course, it's kind of on Google really to try and like keep as much of that as humanly possible, even if their role somewhat changes, and not changes, but is almost like their lane is deep research, higher sort of ticket type stuff that you're going to be doing. And then as Daniel sort of alluded to, the sort of other platforms would be a lot more snackable information. I can kind of learn from that, and then I decide from all of that I'm going to take action elsewhere, if that makes sense. And I think just quickly on that point is one thing that I'm very, very conscious of is that website traffic ultimately is not really going to be growing anywhere near as much as it used to. If anything, you're probably going to see shrinkage year on year on year. But I think, which is kind of a little bit of a later topic, but it still shouldn't be that you disregard that. It should be, if anything, that's your core pillar, and then you utilize that to distribute out onto other platforms. So that's the way I see it going. I think it's just user fragmentation of their journey, whatever they're wanting to achieve.
Yeah, I think you both make a really valid point there as well, in terms of the type of content changes to be short form content, and then the platforms that we're using diversify and democratize a little bit. That will ultimately lead to this shortening of the user journey as well, where we've seen historically where searches could take place on Google, and then, as Daniel rightly pointed out, the user then has to come back and take another search, which means that that journey might not be remembered for a couple of days. We've got busy lives, things happen, and we come back to it a few days or a week later, or when that next step needs to take place. John, as you rightly said, platforms and algorithms on social platforms especially, they can just serve as content thinking we're going to be interested in that because we've made this search initially or because we've engaged with this content. So what was maybe a 2-week, a 4-week user journey in terms of awareness to purchase is going to become like, it could be a couple of days, it could be a single day journey where I've engaged with this, I've watched this content after I've taken a search, and then the algorithm serves me more content like that that's further down the funnel in my FYP, and then that ultimately leads to me taking a conversion. And if you think about it, Google adding their shopping functionality that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years, I think it is, and then obviously the emergence of things like TikTok Shop, they're meaning that we can convert quicker than ever as well. So I think that along with the diversification of platforms and the changing content format, we're also going to see this shrinkage in the actual user journey from point A to point Z as well.
Yeah, and I must admit, as you're speaking, I actually have that in my own life. Like I see that now, is that, you know, because they do follow you around, and with these messages, I am actually starting to, that things I thought, oh, I'm going to put it off until next month because I just haven't got the money, or no, I can't be bothered to get around to it. I'm starting to get thinking, oh, actually, you know, this is just bugging me now. I'm just going to convert, just get it done and pay for it. So, you know, it is working for sure. Is there anything else on that topic, or?
Well, I would like to add one thing. I agree absolutely with everything that's been said. There's one topic I always like to raise because I feel like there's not enough awareness about it, and it's the search engine market share data. Because I always come up and question it because there's just no way to trust it fully. And I'm not saying that Google is not losing some of this market share. However, it's all based on the clickstream data. And it turns out that just around the times that Google started supposedly lose the traffic, the market share, it was also the helpful content update. And it's very likely that the sites that have the analytics installed that actually gets this data, you know, to calculate things, they were affected. So we are not just looking at search engine data, we're looking actually at what's ranking in Google or not anymore, which would affect how much Google market share we see or not. And even if, I mean, in Europe, it's typically okay to see this data because the changes were small. But in China, the fact that from one day to another, suddenly supposedly Bing became a top search engine over Baidu, which is just impossible, just shows how fragile that data set is and how easy it is to manipulate with 3 different clicks that are just random. So I'll be always very cautious to take that data. And I don't really think today we have a good data source to really assess what's happening. So we do see ChatGPT picking up, right? But do we really know how many global users outside of our bubbles are aware of it, use it, how they use it? And I feel like this will be a big question to get the data that could verify our theories, to actually know what our users are doing, because it's getting immensely more difficult.
Yeah, and just also just it sort of popped into my mind as well based on the prior conversation is that another way that Google is somewhat going to protect itself is because it's so dominant in people's lives, and they can in effect shape the narrative. So I don't know if any of you have seen just sort of the general advertisements that have been hammered on the Google AI assistant on the Pixel. So it's the whole, oh, what? So I can just have a conversation with you, and like, so I don't know if you've seen the advert of where it's, what can we talk about? Oh, can you talk about football? Yes, I'd love to talk about. So if anything, if they are controlling that shift in behavior in respect to saying, yeah, that's it, you can just talk to your phone, have a conversation, that can then fuel the mechanisms such as like Performance Max, for instance, to go, okay, I now can identify your audiences because these people are having conversations on their phone, which is an Android device. I know their location, I know where they go, I know the websites they visit. I can now serve those ads. And so, could it be a case of they go, I'm just going to take all the information from the users via the conversations and then serve them ads, completely circumventing the whole search experience as well. So they have opportunity to protect themselves. They have opportunity to carve out almost like or bake a new pie to have the full market share of, rather than just rely on the existing pie to take the market share from. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here, and it is going to be super interesting over the next even 5 years. 5 years is a lifetime now. So yeah, it's fascinating. And also I've learned something about the sort of search engine market share data, so that was really handy to hear as well. So thank you, Natalia.
Yeah, good stuff. And I was just thinking actually, and again, it's going down conspiracy mode, but I think there's always space for that here. But basically, around Google, I don't think these lawsuits and all that are really going to affect their reputation, because I think now everyone just presumes that big business, government, etc. is corrupt. I think we've just come to that, decision as a general public. I don't think anything surprised us. And obviously that's been shown with Donald Trump getting into power again. So that, it just shows that isn't really something that comes into the public's mind. So yeah, I just think we've got to move on to topic 2, and obviously it is all related, and it's around who's best positioned to increase their market share in search in 2025 and why. And I was really, especially, obviously we discussed it a bit, but especially around Bing, for example, they've spent a lot of money, invested a lot. Have they seen the rewards? We don't know. Obviously the data might be how much we can trust it. And Reddit, obviously, were they, leaders, so they don't think it's going to continue. Obviously, it's grown so rapidly. And also Wikipedia is always an interesting one for me. I do find it quite strange how something that the public can just go in and change is so trusted, because I could go into any Wikipedia. I've changed Wikipedia pages before. Should I be trusted? I don't know. Hopefully, but yeah. So yeah, I'll open up the floor. Well, actually, I'll go to Daniel first, if that's okay.
I mean, to be honest, it's a really hard one to answer, because I mean, I can't see Google losing any share, and obviously we always have new generations of people coming into the search marketplace. So I'd say that Google will probably reclaim anything that they've lost. Obviously, the HCU days now are falling further and further away. I think they're going to probably continue to innovate as the year goes on. Obviously, as it was mentioned as well about Gemini on Pixel phones, and I think they will just continue to cement their market share. I think so. I think the thing is that AI has obviously taken the market by storm. It's in every facet of every conversation now. I think that there was like overblown hype about how these things are going to come along and destroy search. We had the same thing with TikTok, where people were saying TikTok's going to decimate Google, they're going to hoover up, and I've still not seen any indication of that. So I think, realistically, we might see people adopt tools differently this year. We might see the general public, maybe they will get more infused with platforms like ChatGPT, because, you know, even the other week I was in the pub and I had a couple of old people around the table talking about it. So it is spreading. So I think maybe we'll see more market adoption in 2025. But in all honesty, I do think that Google are probably going to just continue. They will increase their share of market this year. I can't see them not launching some more stuff to capitalize on that market. So yeah, that's it from my point of view.
Yeah, building on what John was saying, I guess. Yeah, Natalia.
So this is going to be less of a prediction, more of a wishful thinking. But I'm really looking forward to some of the indie search engines to maybe getting a tiny piece of that pie. I'm personally a huge fan of Brave Search, Brave Browser. I've been looking at what they do for a while now. I do use them in my private searches. I have like a second browser for like not work stuff, which is not majority of my searches, let's be honest. And I think they're doing a really good job considering the resources they have and how little they've been around and how small their index is. And they are the only Google competitor with their own index actually at the moment, which I think is worth recognizing. And then we have DuckDuckGo and we have Ecosia, which are based on Bing index. However, they rank their own results. And they get this tiny little bit traction somewhere. So I think Ecosia is based out of Berlin, and I think they have some market share in Germany. And then DuckDuckGo supposedly is like the third or fourth search engine in France. So maybe if something big breaks into the news, maybe there's a controversy about privacy big enough, people will slowly start to change those habits. But we're talking about minuscule numbers. I mean, for those search engines, it's a lot. For Google, it will not be really seen as a loss in their market share.
Yeah, and also I just covered it in the news around, obviously, Google are saying about their market share, but they're saying that, well, Kevin Indig was saying actually, although they may have lost some market share across Europe, their money situation is still tight. They're not losing any money, so they won't be too bothered. And also, you know, it's interesting about security and privacy. That could be the route that people go down for sure. People are more concerned about that. There is more awareness in the news around that. The only thing is that the others, like we said, haven't got the budgets to really get themselves out there to let people know about them. And Google will just, like any major business, will just override them with other advertisements and stuff, targeted adverts.
Yeah. Let's be honest, that also, just one sentence, the privacy part, it does makes the results better. It does improve the results because the context about your search habits and your location does make a big difference. So if you try Brave or any other private search engine, you'll see the difference in the results.
Yeah, I know a lot of people using DuckDuckGo as well. So it's definitely people are using them. John, what do you think?
This is kind of probably twofold. So if we're talking a complete aggregate of any type of search, any type of industry, then I think, generally speaking, it's going to remain pretty much as is. There's not really going to be huge fluctuations. There might be a couple of slithers that are kind of clawed into by LLMs and Bing and, you know, so on and so forth. But I think ultimately it will boil down to what is the job to be done by the end user. If I want to consume video content, then, you know, obviously YouTube's going to be the dominant player, for instance. But at the same time, there's going to be TikTok and even Meta that is going to be a availability for consuming video centric content. So I think if there's anything, there's almost like niches that can be carved out. So it's not impossible to put forward a world where there's a real niche use, well, not super niche, but a very specific use case where a company can position themselves as, right, we are focused on this. We are the best way to get what you want for whatever the thing is, be it a medium, as in video, text, audio, whatever it is, or a topic, so to speak. And then, of course, what usually happens is they then start to want to then do more and more and more, and then they lose sight of what they were in the first place. So it kind of comes full circle. But I think that's the way I see it. It's almost like there's sort of two ways of looking at market share. There's the literal complete aggregate, so it's relatively static, with a couple of changes here and there, and then there's almost like the different compartments of what people are wanting to be done, and then there'll be, you know, fans of certain platforms, fans of certain search engines, fans of certain different approaches, and LLMs, etc. I think will kind of carve out a little bit of a niche in that. So as Daniel said, they're sort of really known, or will become known to Joe Public as answer engines. I just need a quick answer, and of course you can then argue the fact of like how accurate is it, fact checking, all that kind of stuff. However, Joe Public isn't necessarily too concerned about that per se if it gives an answer that they feel is suitable. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, fair point. Joe Public's getting a good shout out to that. But yeah, so I think like, and you're right to say this, like when I look at the overall picture, like just looking at Macmillan, you know, where I work in terms of, you know, things are pretty stable, the usual players, like competitors and where people are coming from. But when you really break it down by property, it does you start to see a change in user behaviors. So for like when we're looking at recipes, where people are going to get recipes, and you know, YouTube, TikTok are coming into play a lot more than they ever were a year ago. So yeah, it does vary a lot depending on, you know, sectors and you know, topics and stuff. Yeah, Ashley, what do you think?
Yeah, if we're focusing specifically on 2025, then I definitely agree with the comments that have already been made. I think that Google, especially at that top level in terms of total market share, you're not going to see much discrepancy. Maybe Google will ever so slightly improve their market share. I think looking at slightly longer, as the younger audiences start to take over the older audiences, I think that's when we have the potential for change. I'm not saying that Google won't adapt and change their offering and adapt to what younger audiences are demanding, but other platforms are already indicating that they're willing to embrace and give them the functions that they need, or that they already have those functions. And I think that at that time, Google could come under threat from large language models, AI, search engines, or TikTok and social platforms a little bit more. It's going to be for specific queries, as John alluded to, but I do think that's where we might see that change. And I think Google will adapt and will sort of recognize that the older audiences are, for want of a better phrase, dying off, and that the young guns are starting to enter the conversation, and they will adapt. But it'd be naive of them to just think that people are going to Google it because people have always Googled it. I think that we've seen historically things change, innovations happen, and if they don't adapt, and as I've said, they're giving every indication that they're willing to, then they could lose market share at that stage. But throughout 2025, I can't see anything major happening.
Yeah, fair point. And does anyone have any thoughts on Wikipedia? Because it's something that bothers me, I guess, probably more than others. But yeah, any thoughts overall and also on that point?
I think the thing is that I class Wikipedia as the equivalent of something called Encarta. I don't know if anyone remembers Microsoft Encarta, where you used to have to put your CD in, and it was like Wikipedia on a disc. I think the problem is with platforms like that is that Wikipedia was obviously like a giant aggregate of information, and it's been around for a long time, and obviously it's had human citation. I think the thing is that whilst anyone can go in and make changes, they have a couple of factors on their side. So they have significant domain trust and establishment over time. I think that their content is partially UGC anyway, because someone's written it and then people moderate it. And I think obviously they do have moderation policies. So if you look, for example, Reddit has boomed, even though it's full of misinformation, wrong information, offensive, dangerous information. You know, we've seen, I mean, Lily Ray does a fantastic job just picking apart search results, and she'll find, you know, sites that shouldn't be ranking for YMYL queries, you know, because they've got factually wrong information appearing. So I think Wikipedia sort of sits in that grey area. I think if they were to launch now, they wouldn't last. I think that it's that pre-existing establishment that's kept Wikipedia there. And I don't mean to sound horrible, but I feel like information sites like that are going to become a thing of the past, because again, you know, I think it all comes down to human behavior. Naturally, if someone said to me, do you want to spend 60 seconds finding an answer or 2 minutes spending an answer? Obviously, I want to spend 60 seconds. So I think when that information, when the whole concept of information being brought to you becomes mainstream, the traditional way of people finding information will die out. And that's where sites like Wikipedia are less likely. Unless, obviously, because as far as I remember, Wikipedia has looked like it has for the last 15 plus years. But, you know, maybe if they innovate and they bring AI in and they start doing things to give people a reason to go directly to them, you know, then I think they'll carry on for longer. I can bet you Google Gemini has probably scraped everything off of Wikipedia and re-summarizing it anyway, which is, shouldn't really laugh about it. If I could say as well one thing, and I think this is a really contentious topic, but I think it's totally valid. I saw someone write about, if I went into a library and I brought a photocopier in and I photocopied every single page out of every single book, it probably upset the people that wrote the books as well as the library, because I'm circumventing them. But then the argument is, well, if the library is open for anyone to go in, surely anyone should be able to use that information. And this is the argument with AI. Just because your information is on the web doesn't mean that someone else can go and take that away. Because God knows half of us in the industry have had a letter from Getty Images because they claim that a portion of a photo or something is something we've taken. And the argument is, well, that's on the web. I think I would love to see Google get a comeuppance. I would love to see a lawsuit where they are to basically go and change their model to start paying people for the information that they've used for training. Because what right do companies like ChatGPT, OpenAI, Google, these companies do not have the right to take all of our information, re-summarize it so they can profit further from it, whilst all the people that were responsible for creating the information don't receive any compensation. So I'd love this year to actually see a bit of a pivotal change. Sorry, I've gone away from the Wikipedia thing. I'd love to start seeing a more fair web as well, where people go back to being rewarded for providing information that AI models can use, including Wikipedia.
Yeah, you're so right. Like, for example, just at Macmillan, we go through a very, you know, we're doing medical content. We go through a very rigorous system. You know, we have to get the right checks from medical experts. You know, we have to have digital content editors and writers. It's a whole process. And then they're just going to take that and in seconds display it. Like, you know, it's their kind of work. So like you say, and with Wikipedia, the problem I've got is that there's some very well-known podcasts that I listen to, and they cite Wikipedia quite a lot. And I know I say it for a fact, but there's a conspiracy as usual. We're going to go there. Is people who have been Wikipedia editors for quite a long time have built up a reputation. Obviously, the more you edit, the more you kind of get you know, you build your stock up on the platform. They're now putting their own biases and editing people that they don't agree with, topics they don't agree with, and changing the narrative. And then people who don't really understand the concept of Wikipedia still go there for their information, starting to learn things in perhaps not the truth, or, you know, at least a fair assessment, which Wikipedia is meant to be. So that's kind of where my, I guess, beef with Wikipedia is. Has anyone else got any thoughts on everything? No? Okay. We'll move on to... I'm going to skip one because like the time, and I think this one's actually going to be quick. People will be very interested in this one. So, you know, if you're interested in a career in SEO, is it worth it? And what skills do people actually need to have now in SEO to actually have some sort of career in it. If I could throw that to Daniel first, please.
Okay, so I actually, obviously, I run my SEO webinars, so I've done a lot of teaching over the years and training, and obviously, you know, training and education in SEO, you know, is changing constantly because search has changed significantly over the last few years. I think the thing is that there's a lot of talk in the community. I mean, SEO has been dying for however many years, so we keep hearing, and then every year it continues. But I think the thing is that the principle of SEO and the purpose of SEO as a standalone skill is losing ground. So, for example, as a career path, if search is changing, traditional search is changing, then the skills that people will need and maybe the job title of SEO will change slightly. So, for example, if someone was to become an SEO now, they would need to start incorporating fundamentals that maybe you didn't need 5, 10, 15 years ago. So, for example, you would need much better data and analytical skills to be able to really interpret data, draw conclusions from data. So data analysis. The other one would be X. So understanding user experience, user psychology, user profiling, and then being able to analyze data. So heat mapping, click mapping, interpreting how people engage with content. Because again, we know that Google is using user behavior. And then obviously actually learning about large language models, because I think for SEOs now, we have to look at how we can then become a source of data for their training in such a way that we're cited in, you know, if someone searches in ChatGPT for, you know, a recommendation for something, you know, we then want the citation there. So I think SEO is still, as a skill, is 100% worth it. I think the definition of SEO may need to change over the next few years. I think it's totally worth it, but I also think the barrier to entry for SEO is going to get harder, because for many years, when SEO was a far simpler thing, it was a lot easier for people to come into the industry, get the fundamentals, and with the fundamentals, they could self-propel their knowledge. But I think now, because search is moving and changing so quickly, people are now really going to need the fundamentals to get on that train, and then they will be able to pick things up. So yeah, as a career, I would say as well, diversification of skill is just generally better for job security, because if you can be an SEO who also has the ability to analyze data, interpret data, do a better job not only at generating traffic but generating conversions, those are going to be key skills that protect people as AI obviously eats into the job market. So those would be the kind of key things that I keep in mind if people are looking to join SEO as an industry.
Yeah, and that was actually part of my question I didn't add, but you covered it. So in terms of like how, if you're working in the industry now, how can you protect yourself against AI, you know, kind of the introduction of that. So yeah, Natalia, what do you think?
I think there is a lot of opinions on how it's all going to change in the next years. But then there's the reality of small and medium businesses, or even sometimes large companies, where you still, as an SEO, explain to the marketing person or the owner, what you have to know what you do and phrase it in a couple of words. Like it's not clear from your website, from your marketing material, what is it that you do? What's the problem that you solve? So I feel like there's this amazing change in technology and how we see it. And then there's reality of communications that SEOs do really well on the semantic level. And also basics of tech SEO, which still, to this day, surprisingly, are really hard to nail for developers and smaller companies. So I get the same kind of issues again and again that I used to get 10 years ago with my first SEO audits. And I'm thinking, wow, that they really need the basic level SEO still, and they will for a long time before they make that change. Now, we will change probably the aspect of who needs a website and how much of a website is your asset, or maybe you have to optimize for search experience and just show up more than on your website. and have those profiles set up everywhere that you're relevant. May it be Trustpilot, may it be local SEO and be on the maps, but you still need someone who's going to go and take that elusive idea of a business and make it into reality, I think. So I think we have still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I think like Daniel said earlier, like there's our world that we live in, and we can see things moving quickly on the search engines and what Google do, Meta and Microsoft, and we're like, oh wow, we need to get our stuff together. But then actually, there's businesses that I'm sure, like you'll work with, are still really behind in terms of their understanding of general sort of SEO and digital marketing generally. So yeah, definitely a good point. John, what do you think?
Yeah, very similar to all the above, really, to be honest. I think if anyone's looking to get started today, as to Natalia's point, I think there's still the real fundamentals, the proper unsexy stuff. It's the case of, okay, the fundamentals of how a search engine works. Okay, it still needs title tags. It still needs, you know, all of the 101 stuff that's been since the dawn of time. And then also, it's segueing into, as Daniel was saying, is understanding LLMs to a degree as well, and also understanding how YouTube ranks things to a degree. So getting fundamental understandings of the platforms that are likely to be in your remit over the course of your career. And then also outside of that is, as Daniel was saying, diversify your skill set for sure. You can still specialize somewhat, but like, are you kind of SEO plus content? Are you SEO plus technical? Are you SEO plus link acquisition? Whatever it is. And in our conversation, Sean, we had several weeks back, I've long thought of it as search experience optimization. Other people coin it as search everywhere optimization, if you want to try and keep a hold of the SEO acronym. Alternatively, you can say like it's brand visibility optimization, it's brand discoverability optimization, whatever label you want to put on it. I think the new generation of SEOs will be better placed, or would serve themselves better, I should say, is if they have that mindset of, my role actually is to get my brand that I'm working for, be it a client or I'm in-house, visible everywhere for the target audience. How is that going to work? Right, well, there's a mixture of this platform, there's a mixture of this format, there's a mixture of this technical knowledge that I need, there's the data and the analytics, so that I can then say, this is what's working, let's do more of it. Or why are these people ahead of us? Why have these people come out completely out of nowhere and they've, you know, got complete dominance in a market space? And I think that's ultimately what it is. So entry level, so to speak, is the core principles. I really can't, it's like if you're probably learning some kind of martial art, you've got the basics that are rooted in hundreds of years, thousands of years of that particular practice. I think it's almost like that's what it is. And then you kind of branch out into the general evolution of how things are going. And I think if they keep an eye on making sure that they can get the brand visible, they won't go far wrong. And then the rest just comes with experience of kind of cutting out the wheat from the chaff in terms of what people say, because it's still ultimately it's still very opinionated in respect of SEO. You can't really truly, try as you might, you can get good correlations, but you can't categorically prove anything, unfortunately, in my opinion anyway. So that's the whole nature of our industry. It is opinionated, and therefore it is a case of you need to go on your own journey and start to learn stuff, and then with the experience comes over time as you tune out certain things, because it's not for you personally, but it could be for someone else.
Yeah, fair point. And like with any career, you know, if you just stick with just your day-to-day role, you know, your day-to-day tasks. I've got a new guest in.
Yeah, she's I can't leave her because she keeps getting hold of my computer cables and trying to run off with them. So she's joining to talk. She's going to be a little mascot. She's only a few weeks old. So
love that. Yeah, just saying, you know, like with any role, if you just stay in your lane, just do your usual day-to-day job, you know, you'll be fine. You'll get your wages and you'll go home. But when things start happening, if people may have to make cuts or promotion comes along, they may not consider you. You know, you always have to look at widening your skill sets and you know, it's always a bonus, no matter what career you're in. And obviously SEO is moving rapidly, and the same goes for that. And also when I spoke to James Bank, he was saying, you know, how just people working SEO now, you know, you really need to learn the fundamentals of all the Google kind of original documents, you know, put them into like Notebook LM and actually learn them and understand them. And obviously Mark Williams Cook has that great sort of patent SEO podcast on Spotify, and that's really intriguing, you know, to learn the ins and outs and the ways that Google are thinking, and you know, that kind of, I think it's fascinating. Sorry, actually, I'm going on again. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I want to echo straight away what you just said there, Sean, around that be curious point. That's probably the best piece of career advice I got when I first started, and it meant that I was able to progress quite quickly compared to what I probably should have done without that level of curiosity and building that experience from happily failing. So they're sort of like top level recommendations: is be curious, do what the other guys have said around learning the fundamentals, because I think that we're in danger of AI tools stepping on toes of those fundamentals and people not learning how to do keyword research and why we do that, or why we do intent research. And that's going to mean that in 3 or 4 years' time, there's going to be this sort of gap in the mid-level where we're not going to have people who can do strategy, and we're not going to have people that can understand why we do the things that we do. So yeah, if you don't learn them fundamentals, we're going to have that skill gap in a few years. So if you do, you're going to be able to really excel yourself, I think, because some people are going to look to cut corners where they can just use AI to do those basic tasks, and they're not actually understanding why they're doing them. And then the final point, I'd be doing myself a disservice because I need people to have these skill sets for when we're hiring, is immerse yourself in the other platforms. It's not just a Google conversation anymore. So whether that is the AI overviews and the search GPTs of the world, or for my benefit, the social media search engines, and understanding what they need from content and what users are demanding there, that'll really set yourself up for success if and when, in my opinion, those platforms continue to emerge.
Yeah, no, great. And I also, you know, obviously automations come into play, which is great. It saves a lot of time, and obviously the chat, you know, AI does help obviously speed up things. But those fundamental things, doing things manually, looking around, checking, like say, be curious, it's still so important. Like say, you just fast track everything. You're not really going to learn anything. Yeah, you're going to be able to put out a report to the, you know, you'll be able to create you create content and stuff, obviously, but how much are you actually going to learn? How much are you actually going to take in? Yeah,
the
great.
reporting point's a good one as well, because we're going to have a situation where that's probably going to be one of the first AI like real capabilities with SEO, is that we'll be able to give AI a report or a dashboard and say, tell me the key insights from this dashboard, and it'll pull them and you'll be able to give them to your client, and well done, you've done a report in 5 minutes. But if you don't understand that, then the next time you come to develop a strategy, you're really going to struggle in terms of making recommendations to a client. And then you're essentially making yourself like a scapegoat to get rid of when they lose that client, because inevitably the strategy fails. Like, it's your responsibility to own that strategy. It's not AI's responsibility. And I think without learning those key skills and then fundamentals, the people will be at risk of that.
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, I say thank you to all of you, and I really, really do appreciate it. It's been fascinating, and I look forward to putting this on the web.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me on.
You.
Cheers all. Take care.
Much appreciated. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
See you later.